Hello, and welcome to Learning from Nature, the Biomimicry podcast with me, your host, Lily Ehrman. This series is all about highlighting biomimetic and bio-inspired companies that are leading the way in helping to create a life-friendly future with nature as mentor and measure. I want to showcase the people doing the hard work of translating nature's genius to human design, and ultimately celebrate the potential of this field. My guest today, Joanne Rodriguez, is the founder and CEO of Mycocycle, which uses mycelium to remove toxins from waste and create new low-carbon, bio-based raw materials that can be used in the built environment. Addressing the decarbonization of the waste management sector, Joanne started her company with the goal of improving recycling rates for the fourth largest waste stream being landfilled, construction and demolition debris. Recognized for her innovation by Forbes magazine, Fast Company, the Biomimicry Institute, and the EPA, she is shifting the paradigm on how we view waste as a reusable resource, not a burden. Prior to founding Mycocycle, Joanne was the director of sustainability for a major manufacturer of building materials, headed an environmental consulting firm, and continues to be recognized as a sustainable leader in the construction products industry. She is a specialist in technologies like the circular economy, biomimicry, and green chemistry, and has decades of experience leading cross-divisional sales and technical teams to success. Joanne was selected to be part of Argonne National Labs Chain Reaction Innovations Cohort 6 and was selected as one of 40 startups globally to present at the 2024 NREL Industry Growth Forum. She has participated in convenings at the United Nations, Clinton Global Initiative, and GreenBiz, while lending her technical expertise to the U.S. Green Building Council, the American Energy Innovators Network, and the Environmental Protection Agency. Joanne, I'm so excited to talk to you today. I'd love to first have you do a quick introduction and include your pronouns, please.
Sure. I'm Joanne Rodriguez. I'm she, her, and I'm the CEO of Mycocycle. And we train mushrooms to eat trash and create renewable bio-based raw materials. We're based outside of Chicago, Illinois, in Bolingbrook, Illinois.
This is so cool because I love mushrooms and mycelium, and I'm excited to get into all of it with you. I would like to know how you got into it. What brought you to this space, and why did you start Mycocycle?
I was inspired by permaculture design. I had worked in corporate for a long time. I'm a former director of sustainability for a large building products manufacturer. Frustrated, I left in 2017 and did environmental consulting. I wanted to hone my skills. So I took a course in permaculture design and I learned about, designing for 7 generations, indigenous practices, and the fact that fungi or even the mycelium could digest heavy hydrocarbons in nature. And I started thinking about the products in the building industry that were getting burned or buried. So I thought, why not give this a try? And I've always put my money on nature. It solves most of the issues for us over time. And that's how it got started. That's how I was inspired. And I was able to gain access through my course. It was at Oregon State University. So mycoremediation and fungi were very, very discussed and widely practiced there, not in the Midwest so much. So I was able to get to some scientists there that helped me validate and kind of establish the first steps of what we do today.
Amazing. And I'm going to jump ahead a little just because this seems like kind of a good question to ask as a follow-up. What did it look like to start Mycocycle? And I know we'll get into the nuts and bolts later, but starting a bio-inspired or biomimicry or nature-based solutions company can be really tricky. And so I'm curious to dive a little deeper into what that looked like for you, bringing together the right people, getting those prototypes. What did it look like to start? Was it what you expected?
Oof.
Whatever you're willing to share.
Yeah, no, it's one thing to be inspired. It's another thing to figure out how to build it and build a company. Because I think not only about like the regenerative approach of using or working with mycoremediation to process toxins out of industrial waste, but I also think about the regenerative approach of building a company. it's a daunting task, and people come to you and they work for you, and so then you're responsible for them. For me, not being a scientist, but being a business person. And I think quantifying, really understanding what it was we were doing, that was the biggest dilemma in the early days. Like, I knew we could grow on it. It was a handful of spores thrown onto some straw and some asphalt roof shingles to see if it would grow. And then I formed the company based on that. I filed a patent in the end of 2018, but I still wasn't like fully committed to it because I didn't even know like what the heck do you do from there. And so I was able, with the guidance of Evan Bayer, actually the CEO of Ecovative, he kind of opened up this world of entrepreneurship. I didn't know it from college. I'd been in industry for close to 30 years. And so he turned me in the direction of incubators and accelerators. And so I spent a year kind of honing skills to understand how to message this and what some of the building blocks would look like. I think, looking back, I would have probably tried to understand more what I needed in science to build this. But I mean, I don't really have any regrets. I'm not a person that looks back and says, "Oh man, I really screwed that one up." It just kind of,
Yeah.
you kind of just have to move with the pace of nature, and that kind of came with moving at the pace of the scientists that I had at my avail, with the resources that I had. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson, is just to not beat yourself up as you're moving through the process, and try to be nimble and make those adjustments. And that's the biggest lesson that I had. And the biggest learning I had starting a company from scratch out was based in nature.
Yeah. And pretty unique still, right? To have a company that
Yeah.
is in this space. I'm curious if you can share any thoughts or insights around the receptiveness of the market or funders around your company, especially like you said, you filed the patent in 2018. What did it look like in 2019, 2020, in the early days? Was there a welcome reception, or did you have to kind of fight against the current to get people to see the vision and see what you were doing?
So 2019 was, I don't want to say it was a lost year. It was super critical because that was like my education. So I wasn't really outward. I hadn't launched the company yet, but 2020, and we can kind of go wah, wah, wah. Like, in the first 3 months of 2020, I was like, okay, I'm going to start getting the word out. I actually got selected for what's called the Industry Growth Forum for the National Renewable Energy Labs. I was coming out of the Clean Tech Open National Accelerator in 2019, was doing very well. Finding my stride, I thought I'm launching in 2020. And then the first event that goes virtual for me was NREL. And so I had to pitch that online. But prior to that, the week as everything was shutting down with the COVID pandemic, I was in person in Las Vegas with the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association. I landed on a 9 a.m. flight. I walked into a committee meeting. I pitched Mycocycle in 10 minutes, the best way I knew how at that time. This would be my core audience. And by the end, I had a line of like 20 people. So these
Yeah.
recyclers like picked up on it because they're constantly looking for solutions. They want to do the right thing with the waste. And so from that perspective, it went really well. From the NREL pitch, my first clients got to me that way. They came in that direction. So I started working with Field Turf, which is a division of Tarcat Sports Division. So I've been working with rubber since midway through 2020, and we're advancing that now. So I would say the reception was really good. I think the idea is very unique. I think if you spend any time understanding mycoremediation, or the functions, the natural functions and natural processes of fungi, you come to understand that this is an absolute opportunity. I think that there wasn't enough momentum then versus what we see now.
Hmm.
And there wasn't enough of a compelling reason for people to do it, although our world's on fire, ever changing, like really crazy weather. But I mean, that doesn't pay the bills. And so
Hmm.
I think it was met with some skepticism. In terms of investors, had a pretty good go with this. So we've raised close to $4 million in
Well,
dilutive and non-dilutive funding.
it's great.
So, I mean, I think that's good. We're getting ready to work through and close a bridge round of $3 million. So I think Part of it is momentum of
Mhm.
nature-based solutions, momentum of driving regulations requiring solutions of any kind, and then my growth as a founder or leader of this organization to be able to communicate around it.
Amazing. And I'm going to back up really quick because you talked about something that I want to dive deeper into. What is the challenge of the construction waste industry? What is the challenge for them and opportunity for you?
Yeah, so in total, globally, 11% of all CO2 emissions come from materials in the built environment space. So, from resource extraction to disposal, it's one of the largest emitters and one of the biggest opportunities to reduce our impact, industrial impact. In the United States alone, roughly 660 million tons of construction and demolition materials get landfilled every year. That's
Well,
twice the amount of municipal solid waste. So, plastic bottles and packaging and food waste, it's going to landfill. It's really creating issues systemically for infrastructure. And now, if you think about this as a self fulfilling prophecy, where we're filling landfills. Landfills are emitting the fourth largest amount of methane gas.
mhm.
It's fueling climate change. And so we're getting bigger climate events, flood, fire, rain, snow. And then we're having to clean that up and put all those materials in the landfill. And so from the other side of that, we have raw materials where we extract from nature materials to make our products in the built environment. So I saw the opportunity to try to divert this waste from landfill or incineration and repurpose it so we could reduce the amount of virgin extraction. So if we could just reuse the materials we have already made as opposed to throwing them away and create new bio-based raw materials that we could use as inputs, as ingredients, become a new ingredient supplier and lower the total carbon in the built environment in the supply chain, then we would be doing something really good. And it just happens to be with mushrooms.
Because nature uses waste as a resource all the time. It has to.
100%. It
And
has to.
yeah,
It
and
has
it
to.
does it really well. And so I'd love for you to talk more about what that piece looks like with the fungi, with the mushrooms.
Yeah, so in nature, fungi have root structures like plants called mycelium. That mycelium can grow for miles underground. It'll work wonders where it's converting biomass. What it does is it secretes a digestive enzyme. That enzyme grows and creates their food source essentially. So it could break down soils, it can break down minerals, it could break down wood. So it's very hardy. So that's the same function for us, but our biomass is waste. And so because it's carbon heavy, and that's the commonality between them, there's heavy hydrocarbons in both. There's carbon in the earth, right? That's how we came to be. There's carbon in the materials we treat. It operates just like it would in nature.
Mm.
It turns this waste into a matter, into smaller parts that feed the fungi. And so the fungi can grow through these conditions. And in nature, it will feed plants and organisms. For our purposes, it will grow into a new material that then we can process. And so the duality, easy for me to say, duality of mycoremediation and material creation lends itself to efficiency. And so most of the materials we treat, we optimize in a controlled environment. We have a bioprocessor that we can put out into the field so we can decentralize waste management, and we can house the process in there in 2 weeks. And generally in 2 weeks or less, we're able to work through materials like rubber, asphalt, gypsum, things in the built environment space that are very hard to recycle
Whoa.
or can't be recycled at all. And then industrial materials like rubber. And we are doing groundbreaking work on rubber with the ability to reduce the plastics entirely, actually digest the rubber and create a new form of bioplastic. So that's all on the mushrooms. We're
Yeah.
just able to optimize it so we get more efficient growth, so we can lower the cost of treatment, so we can be similar, although we don't want to be similar to waste management, but we can be similar in cost profile so people can understand that this isn't so expensive to be able to do.
And I'm curious what that end product looks like. I think this is really important because a lot of bioremediation, and I've heard of maggots eating styrofoam, and there's all these kind of new ideas, but then it's like, what do we do with that end product of whatever they're transforming it into? And so I'd love to hear you talk more, because it sounds like you have this thing that you turn waste literally into something else that you can use and give it to somebody else right away, which I think is pretty unique.
Yeah, and I want to say that's probably the biggest change for Mycocycle and our success is the definition of that value chain. Nobody will do something just because it's the right thing to do. So, I mean, to detoxify waste alone is just a pretty amazing thing, right? And then we're reducing the risks to human and environmental health. But in terms of a business model, we really needed to create
Mhm.
an end value. And so the lowest point of entry for us was to, treat the materials in a couple of weeks. We bring it back to our facility and stop the growth. So it's completely inert. I don't like to say kill, but that's what we're doing. We have to kill the organism, right? Because it's a living process. And then we can grind it or shred it or reform it. We sell that as a filler or fiber, or actually as a new form of chitin biopolymer to material manufacturers, and they can replace things that they're mining from the earth, like aluminum trihydrate, like cellulose fibers or plastic polymers that would go into expanded polystyrene or extruded polystyrene. We can create foam beads. And so we're replicating and replacing plastic polymers with a chitin biopolymer, or we're replicating and replacing from the lowest value calcium carbonate or calcium sulfate, things that might go into concrete that become an admixture and can either lend a property of lightweighting or lessen or cheapen the materials, right? Because there's a less expensive alternative to something that is performance enhancing, because mycelium has natural properties of being water resistant and fire resistant. And so it can lend endothermic properties where it self cools. So there are a couple of points of entry, and that's what we work to characterize. And I think that that's important. I know that there are a lot of products in the market in packaging. We're looking at new materials coming forward to replace animal leather, new foams to go into tennis shoes. But these are the first applications where we're not requiring a facility to completely rework their operations, but rather supply an ingredient that's bio-based from waste that can replace something in their process. And it makes it a low and easy lift for them. And they don't have to completely retest and reformulate, and allows us to get into market quicker.
It sounds like if you find the right input and the right output, there's a lot of interest and it can be just, plugged in right away.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear about some of the hurdles that you've faced bringing this, because it sounds so amazing and that you have it all figured out. And I'd love to hear about what the messy bits look like, or what you're still facing that's challenging, because bio-inspired products, nature-based solutions are still kind of up and coming. And while I think there is an outward interest, at least in the media, in the research, in the papers we see, I'm curious what it looks like from the inside. If you can give us a peek into that, like what were the hurdles, and maybe just one hurdle, or how you kind of worked through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one hurdle is just the validation,
Yeah.
the feedback loop. And there's just skepticism whenever you put bio in front of something. People immediately reject it and say, oh my gosh, one, it's too expensive. And two,
Hmm.
how would you ever have this, infinite resource? And then how would it work compared to the things we pull in industry? But I kindly remind people that we didn't just take a tree and make paper, right? Like there was a process of making paper that came from trees, and we make paper all the time. And there's a process of extracting polymers from nature. We do this all the time. The only hurdle we have is this paradigm shift in our head that something bio inspired or, bio based isn't as effective, and that's just not true. And so the way to overcome it is just to work really closely with the clients in a consultative manner and say, okay, We supply them with materials. They do R&D, formulation and testing. They come back with feedback. We make adjustments. By the way, you can tinker with bio-based formulas just like any other formula, and we turn it around. And as long as they're willing to do that, and we do that, we can actually iterate through it very quickly now, and with the right science at hand. And I think that that's probably the biggest objection. That's the biggest thing to overcome. When we talk about mushrooms doing this work, all they see is a mushroom. It's almost gotten to the point, depending on who the audience is, we don't even talk about what that enabling technology is, which is a fungi, right?
Mhm.
Is mycelium, is the enabling technology that we are working with and deploying. And sometimes we just leave that out of the conversation, which is unfortunate because we don't recognize it, you know?
Are you excited about the potential of biomimicry and want to begin your own journey in this field? Enroll in the Biomimicry Practitioner Program and kickstart a nature inspired future. Use my code LearningFromNature, that's all one word with no spaces, to save $300 when you sign up for the full practitioner program. Just head over to www.learnbiomimicry.com/learningfromnature. Yeah, that reminds me. I leave biomimicry out of the conversation some of the times, and I'm curious if that kind of is the same for how you define the bioremediation, bioutilization, bio-inspired. Like, do you just kind of skip all that? It sounds like maybe, or do you weave it in depending on the audience, perhaps?
I weave it in depending on the audience. I mean, there are people who, for the first time, are understanding what bioutilization is or what biomimicry is. I generally house it all under biologically inspired design or bio-inspired materials. I think that if you don't have an idea of that concept, it's hard to understand it. I do think that globally, through the UN, through the World Economic Forum, through the Biomimicry Institute here in the US and the work there, I think working with global leaders is making the difference. I want to say it might have been Microsoft. It might be Microsoft that has the first chief biomimicry officer.
Hmm.
I might be giving kudos to the wrong, Fortune 100, but there is one in place. And
Yeah.
so I think as we start seeing the elevation of this conversation, that's where you see more acceptance and credibility about the monetization of these technologies and recognizing them as technology just like any other technology.
Yeah. And a really important pathway for the next 100 years and beyond.
Yeah, yeah, I'll say it 100 times a week if I have to. There's no waste in nature.
Hmm.
Right? It's a man-made construct, and working with nature to solve it seems to be the most prudent path. It's already shown us for centuries and centuries and centuries since the start of Earth that mycelium know how to take care and clean this Earth and work in a symbiotic relationship. And that's what we're doing. We're optimizing this as a solution at an industrial scale.
And from the folks that you've worked with, received funding from, collaborated with, are you seeing this increase in interest for and need for sustainable, regenerative, bio-inspired design? Because on one end, I see it and I'm like, oh, great, there's more interest, but I'm not actually trying to start a company in that field. So I'm curious if you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, I mean, even over the last 18 to 24 months, it's grown. Forbes put out an article, March of 22, that 90% of Gen X will spend upwards of 10% or more for sustainable products. This is on the consumer facing side. That just 2 years prior to that, so in 2020, it was only 34%.
Mhm.
So I think as there's a growing platform that supports these conversations, it becomes more aware. For Mycocycle on the industrial side, this is starting to get mandated. If we take our work in rubber alone, the EU has passed mandate that you can't add microplastics intentionally to any product. So in that, everybody heard about glitter, right? That was all the outrage, right? The
Mhm.
cosmetic industry, I get it. But also that was SBR crumb rubber, which goes into infill for artificial football fields, soccer fields, and that is banned. You can't intentionally add that anymore. And so it's an entire industry that's at risk. We see that happening in North America too, Canada and the US, because of the plastics that come off of it. It's a microplastic. So for us, the regulatory driver is really accelerating where we are. So there is greater demand. I still think, like, for us, we are super in tune with our costs
Mhm.
of goods and our cost of treatments and the economic models that we work in. We really try to not have a green premium in place and understand our numbers inside and out and where we can improve efficiency. And I think for us, that's a market driver, and where we can actually show, if like today we're more expensive, but in 12 months from now, our cost parity looks like this. I just think we have to be more strategic and business minded about how we communicate this. And it's okay to recognize it might cost more today. We only can improve, and this is the roadmap for that. And so I think as more innovators come online working in bio-inspired processes, the demand is going to continue to increase as well. So we need both. We need the innovation to come, but we need the business dialogue to come with it.
Yeah. And you touched on something that I think is a crucial point for any bio-inspired, biomimicry, nature-based solution, because right now, a lot of the folks starting these companies and doing, making these products are knowledgeable about biomimicry, excited about biomimicry. They're ready to make it happen. But then there's when they talk to others or funders or companies, it's like, how do you make that appealing to the companies and lower the cost enough or make it at least comparable to other alternatives on the market at the same time that the market is getting interested in biomimicry or bio-inspired products, so that we can meet at this point the sweet spot of we've done the research, we know it can be possible, and we're lowering the cost of everything, and it's comparable to other alternatives, and what this is and the power of it, and or it's just mandated for a lot of folks that has to be the case. And so that's what they choose. And I think a lot of biomimicry startups or products lack a little bit of that, or maybe they just don't have the ability to lower the initial cost right away. But I think it's really important that that's a core part of that business model for you, because it does make such a difference, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
as an option for these companies that are looking at all the options, they're like, okay, actually this, and maybe they have no idea the potential of it, but it's the same or similar cost, and that's what makes them choose that option.
100%. And I think, aside from being nature inspired, it's closed loop or within the circular economy. It for corporations reduces scope 3 emissions and helps support zero waste strategies. For manufacturers, it helps us get them to their recycled content and bio inspired. And so I think you have to look at all of those market drivers, economic as well as marketing advantage. What gives us a first mover advantage? What is our unfair market advantage, right? That's what investors always ask. How do you win? I think you have to also make sure and understand the client's needs
Mm-hmm.
and be able to talk to that, right? So, hey, it's this. And I think that that's where folks in the biomimicry space win and lose, right? We can be myopic and we can talk about this and it's bio-inspired and it's great and you should do this, right? Because it's nature. If once we take the blinders off a little bit and expand that conversation, and understand people won't buy it just because it's great and it works. It's got to make some economic sense.
Yeah.
You get comfortable on that and you talk about the roadmap to lower and decreasing your costs, whether you need to or not, it improves your profit. I think that business aspect, that business of biomimicry has to be at the forefront of the conversations too, in order to get the larger consumer adoption.
Totally. And at least from an outsider perspective, I have seen this, like, I know it's possible. I know we can be there. And it's really exciting to see companies like Mycocycle make it happen, because for so many of the biomimicry ideas or products or prototypes, they don't quite make it there because of all the hurdles and they can't quite do the economic piece of it. And so it's really exciting, because I think as we push the envelope and we see more companies doing this approach, it becomes possible for more and more to also do it. And that's, I think, really hopeful.
I agree. I mean, that's like I said, I'll go back to before I launched, just reaching out and reaching over to Eben and just saying, what do you think of this idea? I remember reaching out to Philip Ross at MycoWorks and talking to Sophia Wang and talking to others in this space related to mycelium directly, talking to Cruise Foam about the use of chitin. And so just kind of doing, my outreach to understand, what some of their technology adoption issues look like, trying to follow a similar path. I can't reinforce that enough that we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mhm.
I'm part of the Argonne National Labs. It's the U.S. Department of Energy's LEAP program for entrepreneurship. I'm in my second year of the fellowship there, and we're innovating and continuing to innovate around rubber at scale. So, working with the scientists who worked with meaty foods in the first cohort of that. So, just looking around and saying, okay, this path is already being forged. How do I adopt it and apply it to what I'm doing? I think is one of the largest learnings, and that's the ramp up that we need. And we need more of these technologies in order for everybody
Yeah.
to succeed. If we all are succeeding and growing, then the skepticism around the viability and equipment and how do we house the infrastructure of it, and how, people, scientists who can actually do this. I mean, in the last couple of years, I've seen so many PhD mycologists come through different universities. So even our access to science is better. Since launching in 2020, I'm really, really encouraged about where this is headed, at least for our specific inspiration and utilization.
That's amazing. I'm wondering if incorporating this process of bio-inspired learning from nature, figuring out how nature does what it does and applying it to different ideas and processes, if that the act of learning from nature has led to any other aha moments or ideas or incorporation of, any sort of inspiration.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And 100%. Like if we look at how mycelium functions in nature, there's a symbiotic relationship with plants and organisms and other enzymes, multi consortium approaches. So, one from a foundational scientific approach, we are looking at multi species approaches to improve the efficacy of our treatment. Why would we do anything different than what is happening in nature? One of the biggest learnings, too, is in the treatment of waste. Just a small thing. We thought we needed a clean, containerized solutions in between rounds of treatment. It wasn't thriving, and we learned we didn't need to clean it. It liked it, liked it dirty. I mean, like fungi grow in the soil,
Right.
mycelium grows underground. But I think from a business perspective, thinking about reciprocity there and
Mm.
collaboration in particular, the importance and value of learning from each other, not only organizationally. We have 10 people now that work at Mycocycle, but scientifically and with our clients, and that they're continuing to learn. We're learning from them. And so to have this essence of collaboration and reciprocity is huge. Our business model organizationally is regenerative. It's designed to make sure that we're all learning and growing. When we make a mistake, we can learn from that very quickly and move on and kind of take our cues from nature. For me as a leader, sometimes it's patience. I'm not always patient. Like I want things now, but to understand that things will happen as a natural event, like when it's supposed to.
Hmm.
Like we can engineer so much of it to a point, and I think all of that really mimics what we're learning, right?
Yeah.
And going back to the foundation of how I learned about this in permaculture design, really generating plans for the long haul, like not just the here and now, but what's this look like in 5, 10, 15 years? How do we implement? How do we do no harm? So like no genetic modification of fungi. That's like, how do we work with what we have? How to be resource efficient? Those are all the inspirations that we have from nature.
I love that response. Thank you.
No problem.
Joanne, I want to hear what's bringing you hope now and in the next 10 years, like you just mentioned, that kind of long term vision.
I mean, these types of conversations, I don't think they would have happened 10 years ago. Seeing large scale industrial facilities come online to make materials of the future. So, it's been a long road for some of these organizations that I've mentioned. They've been in development for a long time. They're coming into their own. I like seeing the conversations coming through the United Nations, from even, the US leadership around bio-based technologies, talking about natural capital, like actually monetizing. This was happening, Yale's been doing it for at least a decade, but for people to actually be using this as a reference source, as an economic indicator of where our economies need to go. Unfortunately, it's always going to be an economic driver. It's again, it's just so hard, I think, to wrap your head around, because we all know what we're doing is the right thing, and at scale, it's going to make a difference. But how do we get it funded and operating? All of that has been just, I've just seen it move so quickly in the last 12 to 18 months. I know that in the next 10 years, we're going to have the ability, with nature as the key to slowing our climate catastrophe, that we will be in a much better position in 10 years than we are now, taking a regenerative approach to all of this, and to continue to try to inspire that next generation, and to see, the generation behind me really picking up the mantle and using this as a daily practice. I think that's probably the bigger thing, that they're saying no more. Like, you have left us with these legacy issues. We're going to solve them. We're going to focus on this as the core of what our future of work looks like, our future of living looks like. We're going to reduce our footprint, all the things that we weren't capable of doing in the generation ahead of me, and in the current generation now trying to fix it.
Yeah. Not only it's possible, but it's happening.
Right. It's happening, and it has to happen, but we don't have to club the baby seal with that anymore. Like, we have to do it. It's
Mhm.
happening because people want to do it. They
Yeah.
want to see this, and they're seeing the strategies align. They're seeing the opportunities unfold. They're seeing the purchasers demand this. They're seeing the economics be there. And so everything is finally coming into alignment to see more nature inspired solutions happen now through the next 10 years. I think we will be looking at a biopolymer future that replaces petrochemicals. And that's my hope. That's my big aspiration in the next 10 years, is to see us, we'll never stop using petroleum. There are just some uses that we don't have replacements yet, but that doesn't mean we don't try, starting today and every day moving
Yeah.
forward.
And there's already so much progress made, which is great. I think for a lot of folks, I'm sure you resonate with this. It's the feeling of it's too late, there's too long to go. It's this guilt-driven doomsday narrative, and that's where I think biomimicry and nature-based solutions and nature-inspired solutions have grounded me. And I'm curious, I guess, to hear your thought on this too, but that nature has been doing this and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You already mentioned that. And there's this immense hopeful and humbling perspective that if we just take and borrow and learn from the lessons in nature, we can do that in a seamless way. And people are doing it. And it's not only possible, but it's happening and folks are doing it. And while it might be slower than we would like, it's catching on so quick and it's just going to be exponential in the next 100 years.
I absolutely believe that. If we look at our buildings, like outside of the context of our innovation and the development of sponge cities that are happening in the Asian markets, because they're getting this deluge of water, and the water runoff is so massive, it's flooding streets. We've replaced all the green spaces with concrete and impervious surfaces. We already see the immediate impact of replacing all of this. Like, on structure vegetation as a technology and being incorporated into modern architecture, that's happening. So I think when you start to do cause and effect and say, okay, what in nature solves this problem? That's the easy starting point from my perspective, to get us to a nature based solution and kind of get to this correction that needs to happen to help, Mother Nature heal herself, right?
Yeah.
We can do that. We can help with science and technology. And so, yeah, that's absolutely where I am. I feel the same with you, that it could feel really heavy to think about the impact of changing conditions, but that's also what motivates me. I have two daughters, I want them to have a healthy future. And I think if I could take matters into my own hands, that's what I'm doing with Mycocycle.
And it's really powerful stuff. All right, we're going to wrap up here, but I'm curious if you have, and I'd like to hear if you have any other announcements or anything else you'd like to say for folks who might want to learn more about Mycocycle, or if there's any way they can get involved, what kind of stuff's coming up, or just general thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly expanding. I would say stay tuned for June 2024. There'll be some major partnership announcements
Oh,
coming, which is
exciting.
very exciting. Yes. We will have some pilot projects happening in Europe in the first quarter of this year around rubber. Our website, mycocycle.com, or, following on Twitter at mycocycle, or sorry, X, at mycocycle, or at Green Girl Now. That's me. That's probably the best way. We're always looking for good mycologists. So, go to the portal on the website. And if you are operating in mycology, specifically mycoremediation or biomaterials, like we're looking for material scientists too, that would be great. But yeah, we should be closing a funding round by the end of February, and we'll have an announcement go out around that as well. So 2024 is a big year for us. There'll be a lot happening.
Woohoo! That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's
I'm so
fun.
excited for you and excited to see all of the progress and all the big steps that happen.
Sure. No, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with you today too, Lily.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Joanne. I hope you have a good rest of your day and week.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. This is a quick reminder that we have some really awesome nature nerd merch like shirts and stickers so you can help support the podcast and look cool on your next hike. These were custom designed by my friend and incredible artist, Sarah Williams, and they showcase the amazing range of unique organisms here on Earth. You can grab yours at learningfromnature.earth/merch. I also want you all to know how much I appreciate every review, rating, recommendation, and support, as you are all helping biomimicry reach more people. Together, we can not only imagine, but create a beautiful world with life at the forefront and guiding the way. This episode was brought to you by Learn Biomimicry. So often I get asked, how do I take biomimicry to the next level? While there are a few university degrees out there, I understand not everyone has the time, money, or ability to commit to years of studying. That's where Learn Biomimicry comes in. They offer a bespoke course called the Biomimicry Practitioner Program. It's part-time, purpose-built for working professionals, and expertly guides you to become a confident practicing biomimic. And the best part? You choose your own project, so your learning meets you where you are. Advance your career and become a biomimicry practitioner with Learn Biomimicry. All of my listeners save $300 when you purchase the Biomimicry Practitioner Program. Head to www.learnbiomimicry.com/learningfromnature, or just tell them that Lily sent you. Happy learning!